It was the quietest moment on set. A producer insulted Julia Roberts. Everyone held their breath. And Julia looked up and said one sentence. After that, the film was never the same. The soundstage at Paramount Pictures, Stage 14. November 2023. A period drama about resilience and quiet resistance. Julia Roberts was 56 years old and had been making films for 37 years. She'd seen everything. Done everything. Survived everything Hollywood could throw at a woman. But she'd never done this. The scene they were filming was simple. Her character, a nurse in the 1960s, sits at a hospital cafeteria table writing a letter to her son. No dialogue. Just Julia's face, the scratching of a pen on paper, the weight of decades of caregiving evident in the slump of her shoulders. It was the 73rd take. Not because Julia couldn't deliver. She nailed it on take 12. But the director, a young filmmaker named Marcus Webb, brilliant but insecure, kept asking for something more. More emotion. More visible pain. More of everything except what the scene actually required, restraint. Julia sat at that cafeteria table under hot lights in a 1960s nurse uniform that didn't breathe, holding a pen that had long since run out of ink, and waited for Marcus to make a decision. Cut! Marcus called for the 73rd time. He conferred with his cinematographer, gesturing at the monitors. The crew waited. 80 people standing in silent professional patience while two men debated camera angles. Julia set the pen down carefully. She didn't sigh. She didn't check her phone. She simply folded her hands on the Formica table and looked at nothing in particular, the way people do when they're conserving energy for a long race. That's when Thomas Garrett walked onto the set. Thomas Garrett was the film's executive producer. 62 years old. 3 successful franchises to his name. A reputation for getting films made. That translated to controlling, demanding, and utterly convinced that his instincts were infallible. He wore expensive jeans and a cashmere sweater. He'd been watching the monitor feed from his trailer. He was not pleased. Thomas walked straight through the carefully lit scene, his shadow cutting across the cafeteria table setup, cables crunching under his designer boots, and stopped beside Marcus. He didn't lower his voice. 73 takes for a woman sitting at a table? Thomas said, his tone dripping with contempt. What are we doing here, Marcus? Making Citizen Kane? Marcus flushed. We're trying to get the emotional. She's 56 years old. Thomas interrupted, not looking at Julia but speaking about her as if she were a prop that wasn't performing correctly. She looks tired. She looks old. No amount of lighting is going to fix that. Either accept what we have or recast with someone who can deliver in fewer takes. The soundstage went silent. Not the productive silence of concentration. The terrible silence of 80 people witnessing something that shouldn't be happening. Julia didn't move. She sat at that cafeteria table, hands still folded, and looked at Thomas Garrett with an expression that gave nothing away. Julia didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Marcus Webb looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. His cinematographer took a step back. The script supervisor clutched her binder to her chest. The entire crew, grips, gaffers, makeup artists, costume assistants, PAs, stood frozen, eyes fixed on Julia Roberts. She stood up slowly. Not dramatically. Just the careful movement of someone who'd been sitting under hot lights for 3 hours and needed a moment for her body to adjust. She smoothed down the front of her nurse uniform. She looked at Thomas Garrett. Thank you for your feedback, Julia said, her voice quiet and even. I'm going to my trailer now. Thomas frowned. We're not breaking. We have the stage for another 4 hours. Julia picked up the prop pen from the table. Held it for a moment. Set it down again with deliberate care. Then she looked directly at Thomas, and everyone who was there later said the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. The film is stopped, Julia said. Each word clear. Each word final. We're not shooting another frame today. Thomas actually laughed. You don't have the authority to. I just used it, Julia said. She turned to Marcus. I'll be in my trailer when you're ready to have a conversation about how this production treats people. She walked off the set. Not storming. Not rushing. Just walking at a normal pace, her nurse's shoes making soft sounds against the concrete floor, past the lights and cameras and 80 witnesses, through the soundstage door, and out into the November sunlight. Behind her, Thomas Garrett stood in the middle of a set he no longer controlled, and Marcus Webb wondered if his film was about to collapse. To understand what happened next, you need to understand who Julia Roberts had become. Not the pretty woman Julia. Not the America's sweetheart Julia. Not even the Erin Brockovich Julia, though that version was closer. This was the Julia who had raised 3 children while making films. Who had buried friends. Who had watched the industry change from one that celebrated her to one that questioned whether she was still viable. Who had sat in countless meetings where men half her age told her what the audience wanted without ever asking what she knew. This was the Julia who had learned that real power isn't loud. It's knowing exactly when to stop participating in your own diminishment. In her trailer, a standard unit, nothing fancy, Julia had never demanded the biggest trailer. She sat in the small chair by the window and looked at her hands. They were shaking slightly. Not from anger. From the effort of staying calm when every instinct wanted to scream. There was a knock on the door. Soft. Tentative. Come in, Julia said. It was Sarah Chin, the 24-year-old PA who'd been assigned to Julia for the production. Sweet kid. Film school graduate. Dreams bigger than her student loan debt. She carried a bottle of water and looked terrified. Ms. Roberts, I just wanted to make sure you're okay, Sarah said. Can I get you anything? Julia smiled. The first genuine expression she'd allowed herself since leaving the set. I'm okay, Sarah. Thank you. You can call me Julia, you know. We've been working together for 6 weeks. Sarah managed a small smile back. I didn't want to presume. Presumption would be calling me Julie. Julia said. Julia is just my name. She accepted the water bottle. Can I ask you something? Of course. Did anyone on that set say anything after I left? Sarah hesitated. She was being asked to choose between professional discretion and honesty. The crew started packing up without being told to. She said carefully. Marcus is in his trailer. Mr. Garrett left the soundstage. I think people are waiting to see what happens. Julia nodded. What do you think happens? I don't know, Sarah admitted. I've never seen anything like that before. Neither have I, Julia said quietly. I've been doing this for 37 years and I've never stopped a film before. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most important part of this story is still unfolding. Sarah lingered by the door. Can I tell you something? She asked. What Mr. Garrett said, it was wrong. Everyone on set knows it. You weren't the problem. You were. She searched for the word. You were perfect. Every take. He just couldn't see it. Julia felt something loosen in her chest. Thank you for saying that. After Sarah left, Julia sat alone for another 20 minutes. She thought about every time in her career when she'd smiled through insults, laughed off condescension, made herself smaller to accommodate someone's ego. She thought about the young actresses on this very production, watching, learning what was acceptable. She thought about the letter her character was supposed to be writing. A nurse telling her son that some battles are worth fighting not because you'll win, but because someone needs to see you stand up. There was another knock. Firmer this time. Marcus Webb stood outside her trailer looking like he'd aged 5 years and 30 minutes. Can we talk? Julia gestured to the small couch across from her chair. Marcus sat down, his hands clasped between his knees. I'm sorry, he said. What Thomas said was inexcusable. I should have stopped him. I should have defended you. I didn't, and that makes me complicit. Yes, it does, Julia said simply. Marcus flinched but didn't look away. I've wanted to make this film for 8 years. Thomas is the only producer who would finance it. I've been terrified that if I push back on anything, he'll walk and the film dies. So you let him talk about me like I'm a piece of defective equipment? Yes. Marcus's voice cracked. And I hate myself for it. But I'm also 29 years old making my first studio feature and I don't know how to do this without him. Julia was quiet for a long moment. Do you know why I took this role, Marcus? Because you connected with the character? I connected with you, Julia said. I read your script and I watched your short films and I thought, here's someone who understands that strength doesn't announce itself. That real courage looks like a nurse showing up for her shift even when she's exhausted. That some of the most important stories are about people nobody writes movies about. She leaned forward. That director, the one I saw in your work, would never let someone devalue his lead actress to save his comfort. Marcus's eyes filled with tears. What do I do? You decide who you want to be, Julia said. Right now. In this moment. Do you want to be the filmmaker who makes uncomfortable choices to tell important stories? Or do you want to be the filmmaker who learns to tolerate cruelty because it's easier than confrontation? I want to be the first one. Then go back to that soundstage, Julia said, and you tell Thomas Garrett that this production has a zero-tolerance policy for disrespect toward any cast or crew member. You tell him that if he wants to discuss creative choices, he can do it privately and professionally. And you tell him that if he ever speaks about me, or anyone else on this set, the way he did today, you'll shut down production yourself. Marcus stared at her. He'll fire me. Maybe, Julia agreed. Or maybe he'll respect you for the first time. Men like Thomas have spent decades testing boundaries. Most people fail the test. He's not used to people passing. Away from the cameras, Julia made a choice no one expected. Marcus stood up. His hands were shaking but his jaw was set. If he fires me, will you still make the film? No, Julia said honestly. If they fire you, I walk. This is your story. It deserves your voice. He nodded once, sharp and decisive, and left her trailer. Julia sat alone again. She didn't know if Marcus would actually do it. She'd given him the map, but he had to choose to walk the path. She'd learned over 3 decades that you can't save people from their own compromises. You can only make sure they see them clearly. She picked up her phone. Texted her husband Ben. Stopped filming today. Long story. I'm okay. Love you. His response came immediately. Are you sure you're okay? She thought about it. Typed. I'm better than okay. I remembered who I am. An hour later, Marcus knocked again. His face was pale but his eyes were clear. I did it, he said. I told Thomas everything you said. He threatened to pull funding. I told him to go ahead. Then, Marcus actually smiled. Then he asked me if you'd coach me. I said yes. And he said good. That's the first smart thing you've done. Julia felt something shift in her chest. Relief. Pride. Hope. He's staying on the project. Marcus continued. But he apologized. To me. To the crew. And he wants to apologize to you. I don't need his apology. Julia said. I need his respect. There's a difference. He knows that now. They returned to set the next morning. Thomas Garrett didn't apologize with words. He apologized by staying silent in Video Village, by letting Marcus direct without interference, by treating every person on that crew like they mattered. The film wrapped 6 weeks later. It premiered at Sundance. Critics called it a masterclass in restrained performance, and praised Marcus Webb as a director who understood the power of silence. Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered. But the real story was simpler. On a November afternoon, Julia Roberts taught a young director that you don't have to tolerate cruelty to make art. And she reminded herself that after 37 years, she still knew exactly where her line was. The prop pen from that scene, the one she'd set down so carefully, sits in Marcus Webb's office today. A reminder of the day he learned what real authority looks like. It's quiet. It's certain. And it doesn't need to raise its voice.